In a city where 200,000 millionaires live, people are rummaging through trash containers on the streets. In one of the world's largest financial centers, the average person spends half of their salary just to sleep under a roof. This is not a dystopian movie. It's not a science fiction novel either. This is London. The year is 2026, and right now we are standing at the heart of one of the most striking paradoxes in history. From the outside, everything looks great, doesn't it? This vast metropolis, home to 9 million people, has more private jet traffic than any other city in Europe. The heart of global finance beats here. Skyscrapers pierce the sky. Michelin-starred restaurants line up one after another. Lamborghinis and Rolls-Royces cruise the streets. But this is exactly where the problem begins. Behind this magnificent picture, 1 in every 4 people is struggling to survive below the poverty line. The homelessness rate has surged to 8 times the national average. The number of people sleeping in metro stations, under bridges, and on park benches increases every single day. So what happened to this city that once held the pulse of a global empire that ruled over the world? How did it come to this point? Get ready, because the answer may surprise you. London's current collapse began nearly a century ago, with a decision that seemed perfectly logical and innocent at the time. In the 1930s, the average house in London sold for £500. That was only 3 times the annual income. By today's standards, that's unbelievably cheap. But understand this. Back then, no one was even talking about a housing crisis. People were worried about something else entirely. The real nightmare of that era was different. Uncontrolled urban sprawl, cities swallowing green spaces, forests, and farmland one by one. London was expanding day by day, and rural areas were disappearing under concrete. One day the government gathered and said, "Stop, this can't go on. We have to limit London's growth." The solution? Draw a massive green belt around the capital. The idea was truly brilliant. Protect nature, keep the air clean, save farmland, make urban life breathable. Local authorities purchased land around the city and placed it under protection against housing development. And guess what happened? It worked. For a while. London breathed. Green spaces were preserved. Urban planners applauded themselves. Everyone was happy. Until decades passed. Today, an area 3 times the size of Greater London is closed off to development. Yes, you heard that right. 3 times. An area 3 times larger than the city itself is marked with "Do Not Touch" signs. The city may be breathing, but Londoners are not anymore. The numbers are horrifying. Every year, 52,000 new homes are needed. How many are built? 30,000. The math is simple. A shortfall of 22,000 homes every year. Year after year, it piles up. The result? A total deficit of 1 million homes. To reach the average housing per capita level of Europe, London needs more than 1 million new homes. But it can't. It doesn't. It's not allowed to. And this is just the beginning, because the story gets even stranger. Let's go back to the 1960s. Back then, not only family homes, but also social housing, was incredibly affordable. Why? Because the city owned vast amounts of public housing. Municipalities built these homes and rented them out at low prices. There were so many homes on the market that very few families wanted to buy from the private sector. Low competition, low prices. The system was balanced. Then came 1980. Margaret Thatcher became Prime Minister, and everything changed. The 1980 Housing Act introduced the still-debated Right to Buy program, a miracle for some, a disaster for others.
To be the Senate. No, no, no.
The concept was simple. Municipalities would offer tenants the chance to buy their homes at discounts of up to 70%, and people rushed at it like crazy. In many ways, this policy was a huge success. Think about it. Thousands of families who had lived in social housing and paid rent for years suddenly had the chance to own their own homes. Home ownership in London rose from 55% in 1980 to 67% by 2003. More than 316,000 homes were sold. For many families, this was life-changing. They became homeowners. They realized their dreams. So what was the problem? The problem was that municipalities were not allowed to use the revenue from these sales to build new housing. They sold the homes, but they didn't replace them. The result? The public housing stock in the UK steadily declined over decades. The social safety net was sold off piece by piece without being rebuilt. Today, in London alone, 330,000 households are on social housing waiting lists. 180,000 people are living in temporary accommodation, hotels, hostels, anything that can be called a roof. And the long-term effects of this policy are being felt today more harshly and more brutally than ever. This is no longer just a London problem. It has become one of the biggest issues across the entire United Kingdom. In 2017, the average monthly rent was around £1,500. Wow, that's expensive, what you said back then, right? Now, it's over £2,500. Stop for a second and think about that. A 66% increase in just 8 years. The same apartment, the same building, the same neighborhood, only the price has changed. Londoners spend 46% of their income just on housing, food, transportation, entertainment, savings. All of that has to come from the remaining 54%. That's 50% higher than the national average, and people can't take it anymore. Statistics don't lie. 1 in 4 Londoners is seriously considering leaving the city next year. It's like a refugee escape, except you're fleeing your own city. After housing costs are deducted, high-income Londoners rank in the bottom 5% of the UK in terms of spending power. Yes, you read that right, the bottom 5%. They earn more, but live worse. What kind of math is this? Now I'm going to tell you something unbelievable. Are you ready? There are nearly 100,000 empty homes in London right now. Yes, you heard that correctly. While people sleep on the streets, while families wait for years for social housing, while millions can't afford rent, 100,000 homes sit completely empty. How is this possible, you ask? How can there be so many empty homes when demand is so high? Because homes are no longer bought to live in. They're bought to make money. You need to understand this. The housing market works very differently from other products. You buy a TV, you use it. You buy a car, you drive it. But a house is bought both to live in and, for the wealthy, as a safe investment. And this creates a massive problem, because demand becomes far greater than actual housing need. Over the last 10 years, house prices in London have risen by 46%. What investment gives you a 46% return in 10 years? You won't find that guarantee in the stock market, not in gold, but London real estate, almost guaranteed. That has turned the city into one of the world's most profitable real estate casinos. And who wins at the casino? Those with money. In 2023, 45% of property sales in London were made to foreign buyers. 45%! Nearly 1 out of every 2 sales. Most of these buyers have no interest in living in London. Wealthy individuals from Russia, China, the Middle East, and all over the world see London as a giant bank vault. They deposit money, wait, and watch it grow. Of course, foreign investment has some economic benefits. No one denies that. But for locals who actually want to live in London, who were born there and are trying to build a life there, this is a complete disaster. Research is very clear. Without foreign investment, average house prices would be £174,000 instead of £215,000. That's a 19% difference. And who pays that difference? Londoners, out of their own pockets, every month, every day. But housing isn't the only problem. The city's daily life, even its most basic services, have been sold to the highest bidder. Do you remember 1989? That was the year London's water supply was privatized. Today, that experiment is considered a massive failure. The logic was simple. Private companies are more efficient, competition lowers prices, service quality improves. Classic free market theory. So what actually happened? Privatizing public infrastructure often prioritizes short-term profit over service quality and long-term investment. But systems like water infrastructure require constant renewal and maintenance. Pipes age, sewage systems collapse, treatment plants need upkeep. In 1989, Thames Water, responsible for London's water supply, was handed over to a private company. On paper, everything looked great. But since upgrading infrastructure didn't generate profits for investors, those investments weren't made. Why spend money? Pipes are underground, no one sees them. Customers pay anyway. So they said, we'll deal with it later. The result? Today the city's infrastructure is collapsing. Since 2022, Thames Water has failed to complete 100 planned infrastructure upgrades designed to reduce sewage overflows during heavy rainfall. 100 projects, not a single one completed. But during the same period, pay close attention, the company paid £7 billion more in dividends to investors. £7 billion. You might say, fine, a profitable company earns money and distributes it. No. These payments weren't funded by profits, but by increasing the company's debt. They borrowed money and handed it to investors instead of investing in infrastructure. That debt has now reached £18 billion, about 80% of the company's total value. The company is on the brink of collapse. It could go bankrupt. So who do you think pays the price for this disaster? Londoners. Again. To prevent the company from collapsing, water bills charged to citizens will rise by 31% this year. The largest increase since privatization in the 1980s. So here's how the system works. The private company doesn't invest in infrastructure, pays profits to investors, borrows money, collapses, and the citizens pay the bill. A perfect system, right? To be fair, it's not just privatization. The broader economic picture has made everything more expensive. Prices have risen by 35% over the last 4 years. The main reasons? Energy, housing costs, and post-pandemic inflation madness. Even if we exclude fuel and housing costs, the prices of everyday consumer goods alone have risen by 25%. Bread, milk, eggs, chicken, detergent, toothpaste, everything. For many people, this increase is no longer sustainable. Wages haven't risen this much. People are doing the same jobs but can afford less. Of course, rising prices mean the government has to spend more. Healthcare needs more money, schools need more money, roads need repair, bridges need to be built, but austerity policies implemented since 2008 have pushed public services to the brink of collapse. Let's talk numbers. Public debt stood at £500 billion in 2008. Today, it has risen to £2.8 trillion, nearly 6 times higher. Combined with an aging population, this has increased the annual cost of the National Health Service by £100 billion compared to 2008. Just healthcare. Other expenses are extra. London councils face £17 billion in road maintenance backlogs. 1 in every 6 students attends a school that requires serious repairs, potentially dangerous conditions. So where will this money come from? Council tax in London has nearly tripled since the 1990s. Across the UK, the tax burden is at its highest level since World War I, around 34% of GDP. World War I. Let that sink in. Londoners earn 30 to 40% more than the rest of the country, so they pay higher income taxes. That seems logical. But here's the catch. Those higher salaries are swallowed by absurdly high housing costs. Londoners earn more and hand it straight to landlords. As a result, Londoners pay disproportionately more tax than the rest of the UK, yet enjoy a lower quality of life. And these declining living standards have very real consequences. People are losing hope. Research clearly shows that a 10% increase in living costs leads to an 8% rise in crime. Londoners feel this every day on their streets. Overall crime in the city rose by 25% last year alone. 25%. In 1 year. Shoplifting? Up by 35%. Basic necessities like meat and cleaning products are now locked in plastic security boxes in supermarkets. They're installing security systems to prevent detergent theft. How absurd is that? Scenes like this have become normal across London. People steal while shopping because they say they have no money. They steal to survive. But the most common crimes are violent offenses and sexual assaults. Today, simply leaving your home in London can be a serious risk. On top of that, half of the city's population, yes, half, says they no longer trust the police. Imagine that. No trust in the police, rising crime, unsafe streets. Of course, London isn't entirely bad. Some people still live very well. There are millionaires, wealthy individuals, successful business people. Michelin-starred restaurants are still full. Luxury stores still attract customers. But for many, the city has become a shadow of its former self, a living symbol of Britain's broader decline. Once, London was a dream for young people, bright, exciting, full of limitless opportunity, high-paying jobs, career prospects, a better life. Millions chase that dream. Today, they see that dream belongs only to the wealthy. Finding a job is harder. Jobs pay less. Competition is fiercer. Living standards are far worse than they appear. And here's the result. Living in one of the richest cities in the world has become nearly impossible. Hunger in a golden cage. Behind the glitter, the skyscrapers and the luxury cars, there is deep decay. A city that once beat as the heart of an empire is now pushing its own people onto the streets. And perhaps the most painful truth of all, none of this happened overnight. Slowly, decisions were made, policies were implemented, each one seeming logical at the time. The Green Belt was well-intentioned. Privatization seemed sensible. Selling homes gave people opportunities, but in the long run they all combined to create today's disaster. London is still rich, still shiny, still one of the world's financial capitals. But whose city is it now? The city of its 9 million residents, or the city of the wealthy investors who hold it in their property portfolios? The answer is becoming clearer with every passing day.